Hello, conference. How are you all? Thank you so much for the lovely intro, Paul. Thanks for having me, Paul, Richard, all of you. Really good to be with you here today. I've got my speech on my phone, so I'm not texting. I am actually just going to be reading out my speech. So, to start with, I've got a pretty incendiary comment. Maybe some of you will think so, maybe some of you will agree wholeheartedly. We do not live in a democracy. So I'm going to explain a bit about why I'm saying that for those who aren't already on board. The origin of the word democracy comes from Greek demos and kratos, which means people and power. And I don't believe that the people are in power when we have a voting system that can deliver wrong winner outcomes. So back in 1951, there was a time when Labour got more seats than the Tories, more votes than the Tories, and yet the Tories formed a government. In 1974, it was the other way round. So the Tories theoretically should have had power, but Labour formed a government. It's also the case that we've got a government who got 44% of the vote, and then they get a massive majority in Parliament with 80 seats above the halfway mark. That's clearly more than 50%. And that is effectively 100% of the power. So another quirk, I won't bore you with too many stats today, I'm sure a lot of you know them anyway, but we have got a voting system in which a party could get 4 million votes and just one seat. And in the same election, a party could get 1.5 million votes and yet 56 seats. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about the movement to make votes matter. We, as a campaign, are completely cross-party, as Paul says. We campaign just for proportional representation in the House of Commons. And so that's just about equal votes, that every vote should have the same value wherever you live and whoever you vote for. And it means that seats match votes. So if you get 20% of the vote as a party, you should get 20% of the seats. It's simple. It's how it works in most democracies. The reason we focus on PR is evidence-based. There's a lot of evidence that proportionality itself is not only correlated with, but is a causal factor in a lot of the outcomes that we want to see to have a better country. So social outcomes, economic outcomes, environmental outcomes. And the political scientists who say this have actually shown quite clearly what the causal links are. So with PR, we see it as a keystone. There's a lot of things we'd like to see better about our democracy. There are issues with the House of Lords. We need more devolution. I mean, we could have a huge debate about all of that, but Make Votes Matter campaigns just for PR for the House of Commons, because we see it as a keystone which enables all the other building blocks to be put in place. Whilst we don't have a representative democracy, it's very hard to change those other things and make them better. So our theory of change is that we need one of the two big parties on board, and then we want to see a pro-PR majority of MPs in Parliament who can legislate for the change after all of the relevant parties involved have already had PR in their manifestos. So that's the route that we're looking at. Thankfully, as of just a few days ago, some of you might have noticed, we finally got the Labour Party to support proportional representation. So this is absolutely huge. It's been a campaign of many years, and campaigners standing on the shoulders of giants. People have been campaigning for this for like 140 years, really. And that project that succeeded in bringing about that change, which was quite a military operation, was initiated by my co-founder Joe Socek, who went on to form a separate group, Labour for a New Democracy. Didn't really work having a Labour-led, Labour-focused campaign inside a cross-party campaign. So last year we did a restructuring, and we all worked together with lots of other democracy organisations to bring that about. But it's very much Labour for a New Democracy who led on that change. So I want to give a big clap to them because they were just epic. So we're a lot closer. However, as again some of you might have noticed, Keir Starmer doesn't exactly seem to be jumping up and down with joy about this new policy. So there will be quite a good few more steps before it becomes policy in the manifesto of the Labour Party. It's unfortunate because I think for them, they should be looking at places like the Red Wall, and we've just conducted some polling very recently which showed that 47% of people in the Red Wall want proportional representation, whereas only 12% are on the other side. So that's 4-1, which is huge. And most of those people want strong policies on democratic reform as well. So a little bit more about Make Votes Matter. We've got an alliance which includes Reform UK and all of the other pro-PR parties, lots of other organisations like the Electoral Reform Society and other democracy organisations, some big civil society organisations and a whole load of celebrities. One of my favourite bits on our alliance page is where we see, because it's alphabetical, Noam Chomsky next to Nigel Farage. So there's some interesting little quirks like that. And another one of my favourite moments from our campaigning ever was in fact when the good Paul Oakton himself was campaigning with us in Parliament Square and having a very lovely chat with Sal Brinton, who at the time was the president of the Liberal Democrats. And you just think, well, if these people can get on, why can't we all get on and work together on the issues that we care about? And then, obviously there are differences, but we all want PR. So this is like the vast, vast majority of the UK want PR. So we spearhead this movement of all of these organisations, and in 2019 released the Good Systems Agreement, which sets out the principles of good voting systems, key of which is proportionality. But it's also about including the constituency link and having accountability and so on. And if anybody is interested to have a chat with me about that, of course, I'd be very happy to. We're now about to kind of relaunch that with a new report which is looking at how voting systems in the UK meet that GSA, the Good Systems Agreement, or not. And an example would be in Scotland, they use a version of the additional member system, which is good enough. It's not the best system ever, but it's good enough. And in Wales, they've got a version of the same voting system, the additional member system, which is not good enough. It's not proportional enough. And in fact, there's been an announcement recently they're going to be moving away from that. So there is a little bit of progress there. So we're hoping to get that back into the consciousness of the parties and use it as a tool to move forward the conversation with the parties about how we actually, the path to PR. It's not just about, getting enough pro-PR MPs in Parliament. It's also about all of the stumbling blocks that could happen that we've looked at from all of the other countries that have tried and some that have succeeded, like New Zealand. So there's a big focus in the democracy sector around that at the moment, and we will be consulting really broadly with all of yourselves and everyone else in the movement about that to get your input. So the next election, something to talk about. With the current news, is anyone's guess what's going to happen, but could be any time from this spring coming to January in 2025. So we basically have to be ready at all times. And the key to this, I would say, is what you, supporters of Reform UK, do at that election. And so there were various stand-asides by the precursor of Reform UK and other parties in 2017 and in 2019. But I would say that going into the next election, if we want real democracy, if we want all of our voices to be heard, then I would really encourage you all here to be standing in every single constituency as much as you can and just making sure that you vote for candidates that support PR. So obviously that's all of the candidates in Reform UK. So do get out there and make your voices heard, and let's try and bring in PR at the next election. We've got a real opportunity like we never have before. And I think the key thing about that is that once we have equal votes, once we're all properly represented in Parliament, we will finally have real sovereignty in the UK. And I know that's something that's very dear to many of your hearts, to my heart. And I think finally we will have control of our own country. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do before then, so I would encourage you to take action now as well. There's lots of easy things and slightly more involved things if you choose to get involved. So, for example, at the moment we've got a petition on our website, or two. One is to Liz Truss and the other is to Keir Starmer. So please put your names to those and let's try and shift those parties along in the right direction. And who even knows, with the current polling, the Tories might be more open to PR again. So I'll be chatting to them from tomorrow at their conference. There's also going to be a write-a-thon where local groups will be out with street stalls, with postcards where people can write to their MPs, but you'll also have the option as individual supporters to write postcards. So that will be happening in the latter part of this year, like in a month or so. And then there'll be the Democracy Awards in December. So again, you're all invited. Do join the mailing list at Make Votes Matter, and you'll get invites to all of these kind of events. We had Rory Bremner speaking at the last Democracy Awards, and he's lined up for the next one. And he does some very good impressions of people like Boris Johnson, as you might imagine. And then we've got a lobby in the spring, in early spring. We'll be getting everyone to go to Parliament and lobby their MPs, unless, of course, they live too far away for that to be accessible for them, in which case we're encouraging local lobbying in the parliamentary constituencies. So, yes, please do get involved. There's lots of things that you can do. And as I say, I'd be delighted to talk with any of you about any of this. Yes, when we do get to the next election, please do vote for proportional representation. Okay, thank you.